Welcome back to another episode of Woo with Proof. I'm your host, Lindsay Rose, and today we're going to be diving into the subconscious mind, one of my favorite topics, and how we can rewire the subconscious. I remember when I first learned about subconscious mind reprogramming, I was like, okay, that sounds awesome, but how do I do that? And there's so much information out there that I think it can get really overwhelming. And I want to break this down for you in 5 ways that you can rewire your subconscious mind. Okay. So let me ask you something a little uncomfortable. Who's actually running your life? Because I know what you think your answer is. You think it's you. The you that sets the goal and writes the vision boards and swears that this is your year. But if you're being honest, if that version of you were actually driving, wouldn't you already have the thing? You know what to do. You know for years what to do. The knowing is not the problem, right? The problem is that there are 2 of you. There's the you that decides and the you that executes. And the executor is not the one you talk to. She's older, she's faster, she was programmed before you could even read, and she's running about 95% of your life on autopilot, while the decider writes affirmations that she doesn't believe. So today I want to dive into the executor and what it actually is, what the subconscious mind is, why it overrules you, and then we're going to get into the meat of it. 5 specific doable ways to rewire your subconscious, like real ways. Each one with the science and each one with the woo held together because, I love the woo and the science. So let's get into it. Now, before we rewire anything, let's define the thing because subconscious gets thrown around a lot. And your subconscious is basically just a vast collection of automatic processes running beneath your awareness. And I'm sure you guys have seen the image of the iceberg and like the little portion on top and then this huge portion of the iceberg underneath the water. That's your subconscious, okay? It's your habits, your emotional reflexes, your predictions, your assumptions about what's safe and what's dangerous, about what you deserve and what you don't deserve. And cognitive scientists estimate that the overwhelming majority of your daily mental activity, most commonly cited as being about 95%, happens below the conscious awareness. And you can think of it like your conscious mind is a flashlight and your subconscious is the entire darkness that the flashlight is standing in. And here's the part that I think really changes things. The subconscious mind doesn't reason with you. So it doesn't evaluate. It basically just records and repeats. And it's built for efficiency, not truth. And somewhere between birth and about age 7, when a child's brain spends most of its time in that slower, theta brainwave state, it records the core files. So what love costs, what happens when you're loud, whether people stay or not, whether you're safe being seen, it records this without your permission and without fact checking because a child can't fact check, right? And then it spends the next few decades faithfully replaying those files and then calling that replay your personality. This is why willpower doesn't work, okay? Willpower is a conscious mind resource. And the research on this is pretty humbling. Self-control fatigues, your attention wanders, and the moment that flashlight flickers, the darkness takes over. You don't rise to the level of your intentions. You basically fall to the level of your programming. So the game is not to try harder. That doesn't help you. The game is to change the file. And the file, your subconscious, was written in a very specific language. The language of repetition, emotional state, imagery, and evidence, not logic. You can't argue with your subconscious in English. You literally have to speak in like a file format that it understands. I just think about a computer, right? It's kind of the same thing. Like you're not going to talk to your computer and be like, change this file. No, there's a certain methodology to be able to get into that, to be able to speak the language of that computer to update it. same exact thing. Okay. So that's what the 5 methods are today. 5 ways to write in that format. Okay. So number one is use the windows when the door is already open. Okay. What I mean by that, your brain moves through different electrical rhythms throughout the day. This has been measured for nearly a century now with EEGs. Fast beta waves are what happen when you're alert and problem solving. Alpha waves are when you're relaxed, and a theta wave is a slow rhythm that basically dominates in young children, which is why they're able to be programmed. It also happens in deep meditation, and it happens in the transition zones around sleep. So that sort of drifty, half-dreaming state as you're falling asleep at night and waking up in the morning, that's a theta-rich state. Researchers call this falling asleep state hypnagogia. And why does this matter? Okay, well, it matters because theta states are often associated with reduced activity in the brain's critical and analytical filtering. So the gatekeeper that normally stands between incoming information and deep storage basically steps aside. This is the same reason why early childhood was so programmable. Like I said, kids live in slow wave states. It's also part of why hypnotherapy works and why sleep researchers have shown that the material your mind marinates in around sleep gets preferential processing overnight. When the brain consolidates and files the day's experience into long-term memory, is it during that time? Okay, so translation. The first 20 minutes after you wake up and the last 20 minutes before you go to bed are not just ordinary times. They are open door time. So the gatekeeper is taking a break and we are ready to receive new information. Now, most of us wake up and we immediately grab our phones and we hand that open door time to other people's emergencies, things we see on Instagram, our email, and we fall asleep replaying the argument that we had during the day, the shame spiral, watching the news. We are professionally programming ourselves with garbage during the most 2 suggestible windows of the day and wondering why we can't change. So the rewire is to utilize those windows of opportunity before using your phone in the morning, and instead of scrolling at night, you're feeding that open door on purpose. You can do things like a recorded audio in your own voice. You can do a guided track of visualization, or even 3 minutes of deliberately rehearsing who you want to become. This is so much easier than doing it during the day when your brain is active and focused on so many other things and you're not in as of a receptive state as you are before bed and waking up, right? That's it. You don't need any more discipline during the day if you can change what goes on in those 2 windows of opportunity. And the woo community has known this forever, by the way. Every tradition treats dawn and dusk as a sacred, liminal, veil-thinning hour. Okay? Prayer at first light, ritual as, the sun is setting. Back then, they didn't have EEGs. They just had observation. The science and the mystics are both pointing to the same thing, right? So, way number 2, and this one explains why your affirmations haven't been working. Repetition alone does not rewire the subconscious. If it did, you'd already believe I am abundant because God knows you've said that 400 times already. Repetition is the pen, but emotion is the ink, okay? A repeated sentence with no feeling is a dry pen scratching paper. Nothing transfers. Nothing gets done. Now, neuroscience backs this pretty hard, okay? There's a principle that you've probably heard me say before, but neurons that fire together, wire together. Joe Dispenza talks about this all the time. It's the foundation of how the brain forms associations. But what determines how strongly they wire? Emotion. Your brain has an entire structure we've talked about the amygdala, whose job includes flagging experiences as emotionally significant, and emotionally flagged experiences get consolidated into memory dramatically more deeper than the neutral ones. This is why you can't remember what you had for lunch on Tuesday, but you remember exactly where you're standing when your ex-boyfriend broke up with you. The feeling was the highlighter, right? So your subconscious doesn't store what you're saying. It stores your states, which means an affirmation said in a state of desperation, like, I'm worthy, I am worthy, please God, let me be worthy. What you're installing is desperation. The words are a decoy, but the state was downloaded. Does not matter what you're saying. It matters what you're saying and how it's making you feel, right? So you want to shrink the statement until you can actually feel it and then repeat that. I'm a millionaire might not be feelable to you right now. Your whole body's going to be like, no, you're not. Have you seen your bank account? Okay, fine. But what about I'm getting better with money every month? Can you feel that even like a little bit? Then that's your affirmation. Because a small statement that you can emotionally inhabit will out-rewire a big statement that you can't. So say it when you're moved. Say it after a win. Pair it with music that opens you up, with movement, with a hand on your heart. And remember, you're not reciting, you're inking. You're inking. I like that. And the woo layer, quickly, because it's beautiful, this is exactly what ritual is. Every tradition that ever used incantation, ceremony, candles, drums, they were state generating technology. The candle isn't magic, but the candle changes your state, and the state carries the words in it. A spell is just an affirmation with the emotion done properly. And the witches understood installation before the neuroscientists did. Your subconscious can't tell the difference between a vivid rehearsal and a real event. So rehearse on purpose. Now, the study that I want you to know about here is from Harvard neuroscientist, and I'm totally going to butcher his name, Alvaro Pascual Leon, and it was done in the 90s. And he took people who didn't play the piano, and he had one group practice like a really simple kind of 5-finger exercise on a real piano, okay, real practice, 2 hours a day for 5 days. And then he had a second group that he had practice the same exercise, but only in their mind. No piano, no finger movement, just vivid mental rehearsal. Same schedule. It was 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Okay. Then he mapped their brain. The mental practice group showed changes in their motor cortex, which is the brain region that controls those fingers, right? Remarkably similar to the group that physically played. The map had redrawn itself for an experience that never physically happened. Imagined practice produces real rewiring, you guys. And this isn't one-off. I mean, decades of sports psychology research have been, proved this. Mental rehearsal measurably improves physical performance, which is why athletes treat visualization as part of their training, right? Not as a vision boarding process, but literally to make themselves better. Now, think about what this means beyond piano. Your subconscious is a prediction machine. It decides what's normal, safe, and quote-unquote you based on accumulated experiences. Mental rehearsal lets you manufacture experiences. So every time you vividly run a scene in your mind, so you see yourself calm in a negotiation that you know you're going to be having, or you at ease in your body at a party where you know a bunch of people are going to be when you're usually insecure, or you receiving a payment notification without flinching, you're depositing a rep into that bank. Do it enough and the subconscious updates its definition of normal. Then when that real moment does arrive, it doesn't fire the alarm because as far as your deep brain is concerned, you've been there before. So 2 rules make this work. Number 1, you have to see it through first person. So through your eyes, not watching yourself like a movie, but like you're living it from the inside. Number 2, you need sensory and emotional detail. So we know the subconscious speaks in image and feeling. So give it the room's light. What are you hearing in that room? Feel the warmth in your chest, right? A vague visualization is, again, it's like a dry pen. So you want a vivid visualization. Do this for 5 minutes a day. Same scene. Repeat it until it's basically boring to you. And when it's boring, it means it's installed. Okay? Now, way number 4. This is the narrator. Okay, there's this voice in your head that talks to you all day long. It has opinions about your body in the mirror, your performance in the meeting that you had earlier in the day, the text that you sent, and that voice is not commentary. That voice is actually a code. So every sentence it says is a repetition. And we just established that repetition plus emotion equals installation, which means that your inner critic isn't just being mean to you, it's actually programming you. Thousands of reps a day. I am so bad with money. I always attract emotionally unavailable men. I can't stick to anything. I never do anything right. Rep, right? Written in the ink of shame, which is one of the strongest emotions there is. And you can't out-affirm a narrator who spends all day writing the opposite file. 10 minutes a day of you saying, I'm worthy, isn't competing with 10 hours a day of what's wrong with you, you idiot. So way number 4 is change the narrator. So 2 moves, and both have receipts. Move number 1, catch and rewrite the identity sentences. So notice the difference between I failed at that and I'm a failure. One describes an event, the other installs an identity. Now, the subconscious files identity statements in a very deep drawer. So when you catch yourself mid-sentence, oh, I'm so bad with money, stop and rewrite it as a process statement. So something like, I'm learning to manage money and I'm getting better. It feels small, but it's not small. You're editing the file at the exact moment it's being written. And psychologists who study cognitive restructuring have shown for decades that systematically catching and revising those automatic thoughts genuinely shifts the underlying belief over time. And move number 2, and this one's fun. Talk to yourself by name. So there's real research on this, okay? Psychologist Ethan Kross ran studies showing that people who coach themselves in the third person using their own name instead of you or instead of I regulate their emotions better under stress with the shift visible in brain activity. And it happens almost effortlessly. Like something like this. Okay, Lindsay, you've handled harder than this before. You can do this. Something about doing this turns that critic into a coach. You stop being the drowning one and you become the one on the shore that's giving yourself instructions on what to do. And the woo has a word for all of this as well. And it's actually older than psychology. It's called spell casting, right? Why do you think it's called spelling? Words have always been understood as creative forces. Abracadabra is traced to aromatic roots, meaning something like, I create as I speak. And every mantra tradition, every prayer tradition, every watch your words grandmother knew that language isn't describing your reality, it's building it. Your self-talk is the longest spell you will ever cast. So cast it on purpose. And I know it's tough. This is something I struggle with, especially with my golf game. For those of you that play golf, I'm sure you understand. But whenever I mess up or like I hit a horrible session, I get out there and I'm just can't hit anything. it really brings out my self-talk and like how I talk to myself. And I've gotten better at catching it and being nicer to myself, but we all do it, right? And the goal here is to just catch it. Like that's the first step. Catch it and then speak to yourself like, hey, girl, you got this. We're going to be fine, right? So way number 5, and I saved this one for last because it's one of the ones that I think the manifestation community skips, and it's the one that locks all of these in. Now, your subconscious is, above everything else, an evidence machine. It believes what it can prove. You can visualize and affirm and theta window yourself all day, but if you actually live in a behavior that keeps generating evidence for the old identity wins. Because the subconscious trusts receipts over promises. So every time you say that you're going to speak up and then you don't, there's a receipt for that old file. Every time you say you're going to set a boundary and then you apologize for it, that's another receipt. That subconscious isn't listening to your intentions. It's watching what you do. But this kind of cuts both ways, and that's the magic, right? There's a classic idea in psychology called self-perception theory, and this is from back in the 60s and 70s. And the short version is, we don't just act based on who we believe we are. We come to believe we are based on how we observe ourselves acting. So identity follows behavior, which means that every little tiny action is a vote. And I do mean tiny. You don't need to prove the new identity with a huge grand gesture. I think sometimes we think we need to do these big, huge things to make a difference. No, you need to prove it with something so small that your nervous system doesn't even flag it. So if you want to install like, I'm the woman who keeps promises to herself, then don't promise the 5 a.m. workout. Promise yourself a glass of water when you wake up. And then catch yourself doing it. That's the step everybody misses, the catching. Evidence that isn't witnessed doesn't get filed. So the practice is 2 beats. Do the small thing, then pause for 5 seconds and say, ideally out loud, see, that's who I am now. It's doing the rep, stamping the receipt, okay? This is why I tell my clients to keep an evidence journal. 3 lines at night, 3 moments today that prove the woman I'm becoming already exists. This isn't gratitude, this is evidence. I said no today without a paragraph explaining myself. I didn't check his Instagram story. I sent the full invoice to my client at full price, right? All of these are building a case file. And every single time that you do this, you're strengthening the subconscious. And the woo here is my favorite of this whole episode. And this is embodiment, okay? Acting as if isn't faking, it's invoking. And every tradition that used sacred dress or posture or ceremony understood that you become the thing by doing what the thing does. You don't wait to feel like her to act like her. You act like her until the feeling catches up and the file quietly replaces itself. So again, rep by rep, receipt by receipt is what we're talking about. Let's stack all 5 of these into one day so you can hear how this actually works, okay? Morning, before the phone, this is your theta window. So spend 5 minutes listening to a track, your voice recording, or doing a silent rehearsal of a scene from the life that you're building in first person and full color. This is ways 1 and 3 in one single move. Throughout the day, you're on narrator patrol. When you catch an identity sentence, anytime you say I am, right? I'm so bad at this. Rewrite it as a process, right? Instead of saying I'm so bad at this, I'm getting better. I'm learning how to be better at this. I'm practicing. I'm going to get better. Or coach yourself by name. Lindsay, you know that you can do this. You got this. 10 seconds, as many times as you catch it. That's way number 4. Anytime that you feel good about something, whether it's a win, a song, a moment of gratitude, you're going to attach a phrase that you can actually feel and repeat while in that state. Emotion is the ink, right? That's way number 2. And in the evening, 1 tiny receipt witnessed. You're going to say, see, that's who I am now. And then you can write 3 lines in your evidence journal. That's way number 5. And as you fall asleep in your second theta window, let the last thing that your mind touches be the scene in your mind of the life you want to live, not scrolling on Instagram. Okay? So total time, maybe 15 intentional minutes of your day. This is not a life overhaul. This is a rerouting of minutes that you are already spending. So the subconscious doesn't need you to be intense. It needs you to be consistent in the right language, which is state, repetition, emotion, image, and evidence. Speak in that file format language daily, and your subconscious will reorganize itself around you. So here's a truth that I want to leave you with. You were programmed once without your consent by a childhood that you didn't choose, in a language that you didn't even know you were learning. And nobody handed you the manual afterwards to figure it out. It's not your fault. But now you have the manual. The door opens twice a day. Emotion is the ink. Rehearsal counts as reps. The narrator is writing code. Okay? Which means the woman that you could keep calling future you, she's not a manifestation you're waiting on. She's a file that you're writing. Starting tonight, in the 20 minutes before you go to sleep. If you want this done for you, I want to share a little bit of what I've been working on. So I've been working on these rewiring experiences for myself, actually. So I have found them to be incredibly effective. And it's all based in neuroscience, psychology, nervous system reprogramming. And it puts you into that relaxed state, that theta state, so that you're able to absorb this new information, and helps you to create imagery and scenes in your mind so that your nervous system feels safe and comfortable with the experiences that you're calling in. I'm creating a rewire method. It's going to be a library of rewiring experiences that you can use depending on what you're trying to do. So that is going to be coming soon. And it's speaking the language of your subconscious. That's literally why I built this, because I was like, there has to be an easier way to do this. If you are interested in that, stay tuned. I'm going to be launching that very, very soon. And if this episode hit, please send it to a friend who you think could benefit from hearing this. Or maybe she's been trying manifestation and it's not working. You know, maybe she has been dealing with something and she can't quite change the belief. Then she needs to hear this. Also, would genuinely appreciate if you would rate and review the show. It truly moves the needle for me. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, guys. Bye.